Straight
Are your results AWOL, AWOL, absent without leave? Now, I talked about and coined this concept of the AWOL effect back in episode 1184, which was several years ago. And I'm revisiting that topic as it's a key thing that the ideal member of Work on Your Game University often is dealing with. They have this issue going on in their mind, even though you may not have put a label on it yet, so you don't know what the AWOL effect is, but I'll explain it in a moment. And you need to address it, you need to understand it, and you need to get it resolved, or understand it, address it, and get it resolved. So as I explain this concept here today and how we actually do something about it, once you understand it, I want you to ask yourself if I'm describing how you feel about your current station and your current situation. So listen very closely as I break this down. And if I'm describing you, then what you're going to do is become a member of Work on Your Game University, because you're going to understand that I understand exactly where you're at, why you're there, how you feel about it, and what you want to do about it. I'm going to break all that down here today. So again, the topic is, are your results AWOL, AWOL? So what exactly does this mean? So we know that AWOL, the actual acronym, stands for absent without leave. And we are, that is regarding that what we're going to, let me say that again. We're going to reword and reframe this to, instead of absent without leave, we're going to change it to ability without outcome or leverage. That's what AWOL stands for. Ability without outcome or leverage. AWOL. So you have the game, you have the skill, but for whatever reason, you're not getting your desired outcome and you don't have leverage, meaning the amount of effort that you're putting into something is not producing a multiple return such that your effort, the juice is worth the squeeze. It's just not happening right now. That's the AWOL effect. This is the description that I give of high performance people who clearly have talent, skill, potential, and are willing to put in the effort, but for whatever reason, your results are not reflecting your talent, skill, and willingness to do the work. And because of this mismatch, you're dealing with a high level of frustration, disappointment, embarrassment, and just overall just trying to figure out, what do I do about this? Do I quit? Am I doing the wrong thing? Am I the wrong person? Is something wrong with me? Usually, if you're feeling this, it's usually because you don't have the right systems in place. Often because you are not clear on exactly what you're doing, who, what, when, where, why, and how. Your positioning is off, meaning the world does not understand who you are or what you're doing. And or your execution strategy is failing, meaning your plan for how to actually deploy all the stuff you have is simply not working. That's what the AWOL effect is all about. And that's what we're going to talk about here today. So personally, I have dealt with the AWOL effect in my sporting days, also dealt with it in my business days, times where I felt like I had ability, but I didn't have the outcomes and I didn't have any leverage behind my ability. Anytime I want to go to a higher level of what I'm doing, even to this day, there is some level of AWOL effect that I'm dealing with where I want to go to that higher level. I feel like I have the ability to go there, but I don't have the outcome. I don't have the leverage just yet. So I'm at the bottom, not at the bottom, but I'm at whatever level, looking up at the next level, and I believe I could and should be there, but for whatever reason, I don't have the outcome of being there. So because I have the ability to get to a level, I believe I have the ability to get to a certain level, and I want you to listen to this for yourself, but haven't yet gotten the outcome, and I know that I haven't created any leverage that would allow me to get my ability to produce the desired outcome. So I kind of feel stuck. In other words, anytime you're trying to move from one level to another level, especially at really high levels that require a certain amount of ambition, that means a desire to do something that goes above and beyond what most people would aim for, you're going to deal with the AWOL effect. Why? Because there's going to be times, probably plenty of times, when you feel like your skill level should have you at a higher reality level than where you are. So in reality, you're at level 3, but you feel like skill-wise, you should be at level 6. That's the AWOL effect. And it's important because a lot of people in my audience have this exact problem. A lot of the people who I work with, this is the exact problem that they're dealing with. I want to be at this level, but I'm only at this level. They may not say it in so many words, but that's what it is. Usually the people I'm working with already have a healthy amount of talent, skills, desire, and willingness to work. These are good people to work with. Talent, skill, desire, and a willingness to work. Okay, anybody can work with that person. But they are not getting the results that reflect all of those elements. That's what the AWOL effect is. Now you can juxtapose this with the imposter syndrome idea. Imposter syndrome is when you feel that your results, your outcomes, far outpace who you are as a person. So you don't even feel like you have that much ability, but your outcomes say that you do have a whole lot of ability, because how else did you get there if you didn't have the ability? AWOL effect is the exact inverse. I feel like I have the ability, but my outcomes are not on the same page as my thoughts and my beliefs about myself. That's what the AWOL effect is. Now let's continue on point number 2. Today's topic, once again, is, are your results AWOL? Number 2, what are you feeling when going through the AWOL effect? When you are dealing with this, how exactly does it feel? I would say, from my experience, either dealing with myself or others, is that when you're dealing with the AWOL effect, it's usually a mix of several different feelings. One is a feeling of frustration. The frustration comes from believing that you are better than your current position. I'm at level 6. I believe I should be at a level 8. And you're frustrated with the fact that you're only at a level 6 as opposed to being at a level 8. Because you're looking up at the level 8 and you're saying, everything that's happening there, I know I can do. But for whatever reason, I'm stuck down here. The reason why AWOL effect is the inverse of the imposter syndrome is because when you believe your position is better than you, then that leaves you feeling like, hey, maybe I don't belong here. That's the imposter. Imposter is someone is in a place they're not supposed to be. But when it's the other way around, you feel like you are better than your current circumstance. That's when you get the AWOL effect. That's the frustration that comes with the AWOL effect, because you become this frustrated person experiencing this because you believe you're doing everything that you can do. You're expressing your game, you're expressing your skills, and based on everything that you've done, shared, and practiced, you should be at a level that is higher than the one that you're at right now, and you haven't quite figured out why the discrepancy. You're not getting the results, even though you're working hard, though you have the output to show. And then this all leads to mental overload. This leads to you getting stuck in your own head and overthinking things constantly, overthinking things, period, constantly second guessing yourself and reanalyzing yourself so far as to confuse activity for progress. That often happens to people who are dealing with the AWOL effect, because in my experience, highly successful people, highly driven people, high performing individuals tend to have a healthy amount of willingness to do the work. And when things are not working the way that they want them to work, you tend to be willing to double and even triple down on the effort to make sure that it does work out. So notice how, when you're dealing with the AWOL effect, how it gets in the way of all these things. Because you're already working hard, but you don't have the output to show. That leads to mental overload, often leads to you getting stuck in your own head. In other words, overthinking things, constantly second guessing yourself. In other words, your decisions are not real decisions, because as soon as you make one, you start rethinking the decision, which means the decision was never real in the first place. And you're consistently reanalyzing yourself, which leads to you confusing activity for progress, even though there is no progress, despite all of your activity. That's why you got to be careful confusing activity and progress as the same thing, because you can give a whole lot of activity but make very little progress. This is often a result of a lack of clarity. When you are unclear on what you're doing, you can end up experiencing the AWOL effect, because you're not clear on, where do I want to go? What outcomes do I want to get? How do I want to go about doing this? When you're unclear on those questions, it doesn't really matter what your results are. It doesn't matter what your outcome is. And it doesn't matter if you have or don't have leverage, because if you don't know where you're going, well, how do you know if you have leverage? You may have leverage in one space, but if you're not trying to go to that space, it doesn't really matter that you have leverage. The answer is no, it doesn't. Leverage matters only when you can actually use it. And you can put it to good use for something that you want to do. For example, in the basketball space, I would say even to this day, even though I've been out of the basketball space for 10 years, I have leverage in the basketball world. If I wanted to get involved somehow professionally in the basketball world, I don't mean necessarily as a player, but if I wanted to break down basketball, analyze it, become an online trainer, or maybe even start a coaching career by being on somebody's high school bench as a volunteer, I think I could probably get my foot in the door just because of my brand reputation. To this day, what I'm saying that to say is that I have leverage. I have leverage in the basketball space because of my background in basketball. However, that leverage doesn't mean much to me today because I'm not trying to use it. I'm not trying to leverage my leverage to do anything, at least not right now. And Why does that matter? Because I'm clear that that's not where I'm trying to go. And because of that clarity that of what I don't want, I also have clarity on what I do want. I'm building Work on Your Game Incorporated. And this is all about helping high performing individuals, whether you have ever played a sport or not, through our systematized discipline, process, and performance systems. Through that, that's how I'm helping people. And again, I'm working with high level performers, high level professionals, high level entrepreneurs, sports related or not. And because I'm clear on what I want, it's easier for me to say yes or no to certain opportunities. Because does this opportunity fit into what I'm trying to do? Yes, let's move forward. No, let's not move forward. Simple as that. What happens is when you're working really hard, but don't have the output to show, it leads to mental overload, you getting stuck in your own head, overthinking things, second guessing, reanalyzing and confusing activity for progress, even though there's no progress. Now, despite all of that, there's no progress after all your activity. This is often a result of a lack of clarity because you're looking for a missing piece that's simply not there if there even is a missing piece. You're looking for something that you can't find, but the thing you're looking for either doesn't exist or you shouldn't be looking for that anyway. You're searching for a magic fix that might solve your problem, and despite all your searching, everything feels complex, everything feels scattered. You feel like no matter what solution you come up with is not actually solving the problem that you have. Does any of you feel like this? As a result, all your efforts are producing this low return on investment. You're working hard, but your returns are small. And you feel like you're stuck in this loop of effort with no payback. You feel like you are invisible in the marketplace. You are mentally, emotionally, if not physically, also hitting a wall. Despite all of these things that you're doing, nothing is turning over, so to speak, the way it's supposed to. People experiencing this AWOL effect are far from lazy. So this issue that we're talking about here today is not like what we talked about in episode number 2568, which is you are lazy as fuck. All right, most people experiencing the AWOL effect ain't lazy, because to even experience the AWOL effect, first of all, you have to have the ability and you got to be putting in the work. You can't have the AWOL effect if you're not skilled enough and or you're not giving enough effort. So everyone who is experiencing the AWOL effect, those of you who are listening to me right now, you're not lazy. You're a pretty hard worker. You're a disciplined person. You're pretty consistent. Compared to most of the people you know, you are one of the most disciplined and one of the hardest working people. That's one of the reasons why you're experiencing the AWOL effect, because of despite your discipline, despite your ability, you're not getting anywhere close to the kind of results that you expected given your inputs. The issue is not also that you don't have the right information. You're far from stupid. What you have, what you're suffering from, is a lack of structure and a lack of organization to what you're doing. This is why this problem gets solved with a system. And we're going to get to that in a moment. But I want to make sure I'm clear here on the second point, where the frustration comes from. All right, all this effort, all these skills, all this investment, all these things I know, all these things I can do, all these things I have done, yet I'm still not getting anywhere close to where I want to be. If I'm describing you, we're talking about the AWOL effect. Let's move on to point number 3. Today's topic, once again, is, are your results AWOL? Number 3, what are some ways that it manifests itself and how does this actually happen? Let's address that. How does the AWOL effect manifest itself and how do you even get here? Here, I'm going to give you some patterns that you should look out for if you want to know if you're experiencing the AWOL effects. Usually, there's a lot of endless starting, but rare finishing. In other words, you got a whole lot of things that you have begun doing, but you never completed doing. In other words, you got a bunch of shallow mines that you started digging. You took a couple digs with the shovel, but you didn't go that deep. And you got a million of these little shallow mines where you went an inch, you went a mile wide and an inch deep is the metaphor that we've used here. We did a whole episode on this concept when I talked about inches and miles, episode number 1254. A lot of people go a mile wide and an inch deep, but all the treasure, folks, is buried deep underneath the ground, which means you need to go an inch wide and a mile deep. That's one of the issues of the AWOL effect, or one of the symptoms of the AWOL effect, is that you have a whole lot of shallow mines that you never dug to the bottom of. And there's a whole lot of output because of this, because of all these shallow mines. There's a ton of output, but very low conversion. In other words, very low results. Conversion means the result. You tend to do a lot of planning, but you are not taking a lot of strategic action despite all your plans. So you got a bunch of plans of things you could do, but you're not actually doing them. People experiencing the AWOL effect find themselves thinking about things a lot more than actually doing things. And that's a problem. All right, you don't want to be in the business of, you don't want to be in the thinking about it business. I talked about this in episode number 3365. Stop thinking about it. How to stop thinking about failure. Episode number 980. A lot of times people don't take action, not because they're afraid of succeeding, because they're afraid of failing. Sometimes they're afraid of succeeding because now you got to succeed again and again and again. But often it's people who just spend too much time thinking. You get caught in your head thinking about things and playing things through and considering what might happen and what might not happen and what somebody may say before you even try anything. And before you know it, a whole hour has gone by, a day has gone by, 10 years have gone by, you haven't even gotten started. This happens to people. Getting into this chronic loop also is another thing that happens. You are taking in information, you're reading books, you're taking courses, but you're not actually applying any of the stuff that you are taking in, even though you're taking in a ton of it. This is how people end up in the AWOL effect. These are some of the ways that you end up there. Now, you may not necessarily end up getting it if you do any one of these in isolation, but if you're doing all of them together, these are clear symptoms of the AWOL effect. I remember I was talking to a friend of mine, a woman I met at a business conference years back, and she was telling me, hey, such and such person, this known marketing person, just put out this material where they drop like this motherload of content that you can go download for free. And it was the truth. She was telling me, she gave me the link that, hey, this person who's pretty known, they put out this page that has all this stuff that they've been using over the years, and they'll let you download it for free. And I remember looking through the page, and there was a lot of stuff on there. There was a lot of things this person was literally offering to download for free. The issue was I did not want to get caught up in looking at that shit, because I knew all it would do was take me off track from what I needed to be doing at that time, which was not downloading this guy's free shit that he was offering. A lot of people get caught in this loop. Information, reading books, taking courses, following people on social media, listening to podcast episodes, but not actually following through on anything that you're taking in. I'm not telling you not to do any of these things. What I'm telling you, and I've told you this before, is you need to narrow down your sources. You cannot take in information from everyone sharing information, because there are too many people. You don't have enough time to consume everything that everybody puts out, even on one particular subject. You need to pick your main guru or gurus on a certain subject and only consume their stuff, and just stick to everything that they tell you about a certain subject or certain things, and go as deep as you can in that one well. You cannot go to the bottom of 2 wells or 3 or 17 wells all at the same time. It's not possible. A lot of people end up with the AWOL effect, not because they don't have skill or ability or desire, but because they are diluting their most valuable resource, your focus and your attention, by trying to do more than one thing at a time. There is always new, bright, shiny information. Okay, this is one of the traps that you must avoid if you are a person who's big on consuming content and or attending events. Now, I consume content, I attend events, but I'm selective with what I am paying deep attention to, and I'm also very selective as to what I decide to consume. I go to events these days not to listen to the speakers. I go to events so I can meet the people, the other people who showed up at the event. The speakers, what they're saying from the stage, usually, and I'm speaking for myself, usually what they're saying from the stage ain't new. I probably heard it already from them. I probably already heard them say it. They're going on stage, they're just giving you the highlights of what they say. And I'm not knocking that. The event business is a business for a reason. People like going to events and all that. But you got to be selective with your information, selective with your attention. There is always new, bright, shiny information coming your way. I talked about shiny information syndrome in episode number 2012. You got to be careful with shiny information syndrome, because there's always someone new with new information. I was on X yesterday, and there was some woman, some white woman, I don't know who she is. She was announcing that she's starting a podcast. So of course she's starting a podcast. Everybody's starting a fucking podcast. Right? And I don't knock people starting podcasts, because obviously there's probably some people who want to listen to what she has to say, whoever the hell she is. The thing is, you can't listen to every podcast. That's the point. People experiencing the AWOL effect often find themselves going back to old levers, metaphorically speaking. You get what I mean by that? When I say someone is often going back to their old lever, metaphorically speaking. Wait, where am I? Let me make sure I'm looking at the right thing. I thought I lost my spot. People experiencing this AWOL effect, again, you're far from lazy. You're not stupid. It's just a lack of structure. What happens with your structure, it gets solved by a system. And we're going to get to that soon. So I just jumped ahead for a second. Let me go back. So now let me move on to point number 3. Today's topic, once again, is, are your results AWOL? Number 3, the ways that I think I lost my spot here. So let me do this again. The ways that it manifests itself. We're already on point number 3. So a lot of Endless starting, but rare finishes. Hopefully, Nico, you can clean that up, what I just did there. I jumped ahead, then I jumped back, then I jumped back ahead. So there's a whole lot of starting, but rare finishes. A bunch of shallow minds that people going into, taking a whole bunch of material in, but not finishing anything. There's always this new shiny information. So people experiencing these AWOL effects often find themselves going back to old lovers, metaphorically speaking. And what's an old lover? An old lover, what I mean by that in metaphor is like a person who is lonely in dating. So you go back to somebody you used to date in the past just so you have some companionship, not because you actually want that person. So what happens is people experiencing the AWOL effect, you may go back to undervaluing and underselling yourself just so you can get a customer, just so you can get a client, just to get people into your world, saying yes to things that you should be saying no to, saying yes to people who you should be turning away. Then this leads to a level of frustration because you will realize what you're doing, but then at the same time, you can't stop yourself from doing it. It's kind of like being addicted to a controlled substance. You know you're doing the wrong thing, but you can't stop yourself from doing it. And then you'll see people with less talent than you seemingly winning more than you're winning, which really pisses you off because you're like, how the hell is this person winning and I'm way better than this person? Ultimately, this leads to the AWOL effect sufferer having difficulty articulating your value because even though you know you're good enough, you're struggling to explain yourself or what you do in a way that moves people to action because you are so confused with all the stuff you're taking in, all the different things you're doing, all the things you see everybody else doing that isn't even that good, but it clearly looks like from the outside looking in, it looks like it's working. That's why also you got to be careful with the things that you're taking in. All of these things lead to the AWOL effect. Is that you have the ability, you don't have the outcome, you don't have the leverage, and you want to know what the hell the problem is. Have I accurately described where you're at, how you're living, where you stand right now? If so, what I'm going to do right here is I'm going to recap what I just told you, and then tomorrow, I'm going to tell you how to fix this. Let's recap today's class, which is, are your results AWOL? Again, the AWOL effect I first brought to your consciousness in episode 1184. Many of you didn't hear it or don't remember it. That's why we're doing it here. Number one, AWOL technically means absent without leave, but we are absent without leave, We're reworking it to mean ability without outcome or leverage. And this describes the high performance people who clearly have talent, potential, skill, a willingness to do the work, but for whatever reason, all of those things combined are not producing the outcomes that you want, and it leads to a high level of frustration. Number two, what do you feel when you go through it? Usually a mix of several things. We mentioned the frustration. You believe you're better than your current situation. And that's why it's the inverse of the imposter syndrome, when you believe you're worse than your current situation. And it often comes from a lack of clarity. You're not quite sure exactly where you're going, why you're going there, what you want to do when you get there, who exactly you're going to help. And you end up on this loop. You're mentally and emotionally in this loop. You feel invisible in the marketplace. You feel like you're hitting a wall mentally, emotionally, maybe even physically. And it's not because you're stupid. It's not because you're lazy. It's simply because what you do have is not properly structured and is not properly directed. But all of these things get solved with the system, because the system solves the problem of structure and direction all in one blow. So leads to point number three. What are some ways that AWOL effect manifests itself? Usually happens because there's a lot of endless starting, but rare finishes. You start things that you don't finish. You're consuming way too much stuff, which is continually confusing you. You do a lot of planning, but don't take a whole lot of action. You are taking in books, podcasts, information, courses, going to events, but not applying anything because you're taking in too much before you have a chance to apply the thing you got last week. Now you got something new that you didn't even get a chance to finish the last one. Now you want to start this new one and you never finish anything. When you're experiencing the AWOL effect, you may find yourself going back to old habits that you know you wanted to extinguish, but at least they make you feel comfortable because there's some grooves still there. You've done that thing in the past. This leads to a high level of frustration. Most of the time, people who are experiencing the AWOL effect have a level of frustration that they either are continually dealing with or they find a way to rationalize. And you have difficulty articulating at some point your value in the marketplace, what exactly you do, explaining yourself to yourself, let alone to anybody else. And you're not able to move anyone to action because your energy is weak. When you're confused, it's hard to get anybody else clear. All of this is explaining what the AWOL effect feels like. Tomorrow, I'm going to tell you how to fix it. Between now and then, go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. Schedule a time to get on a call with us. Let's talk about how we can take you from where you're at to where you want to go with mindset, strategy, systems, and making sure you're being held accountable. That's all at workonyourgameuniversity.com. Work on your game. Dre, all